recommend it very highly. All right, Mike, are you ready?
I'm all set.
Okay. Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. I'm delighted to have Mike Amori here talking about joy of polymathic connecting the dots. Mike, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Shrikant.
Oh, just a second. I have to tell you, this is part of our Comprehensivist Wednesdays that we do with Greater Philadelphia Thinking Society, which has a lot of thinking members. So I'm always delighted to have them here. Mike, over to you.
Great, thank you. Rather than give my background and things that I've done, I'd rather start with sharing with you how I came to 52 Living Ideas in the first place, what's kept me here, and then a couple of things about this strange phenomena of how I'm suddenly finding connections between these seemingly very different disciplines that we study here. So I am a professional chess coach. I've been teaching chess professionally for over 30 years. My primary job pre-COVID was coaching tournament players, mostly scholastic age. And one of the biggest problems I have as a scholastic coach is the issue of resilience. You're talking about a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old that's competing over the chessboard. Very often they have issues with resilience because when they lose a game, it becomes very difficult to bounce back. So I'm a fan of Jordan Peterson, and I like his approach because he can go very, very, very deep on a topic. And then all of a sudden he starts snapping his fingers and he said, just bloody well get on with it. I love teachers like that. So I went online on YouTube, and sure enough, I pop in Jordan Peterson. And as the videos started to populate, there was somebody up there with a bald head just like mine. It turns out to be Shrikant. And underneath 52 Living Ideas. And I started to watch a couple of the videos, and then I finally attended. Now, what made me stay was we were here on a Friday doing Self-Improvement Friday, where Shrikant mentioned a book called The Art of Learning, which is a fascinating book. And we actually improv'd our way through another presentation. And what happened was Shrikant connected the book to the Tao Te Ching, a topic he was about to tackle, let's say a week from now. And he put his hands up like this in front of the whole audience and said, I do not know this book. And when I first heard that, I was taken aback. And I'm saying, here's the guy that's running everything, putting his hands up and admitting that he does not know the topic. And that's what put me in my seat, because I would be very apprehensive giving this type of talk without already being humbled a little bit, and then seeing many people here that I'm getting to know show a bit of humility. So that made it very easy for me to stop, listen, participate, etc. Now back to the connection thing. When I was younger, I was drawn to polymathy through trauma. My father died my first day of high school. My mom was a bit shaky prior to his death, which in essence meant that I lost both parents the same day. I needed to make money at the age of 13, 14, which led me to the best schooling I ever got in my life. It provided me with what I'm going to call tonight the glue of how I learn. And that's through interpersonal skill. So what happened to me was at the age of 14 and 15, I started to work in supermarkets, eventually working in a local deli and driving a taxi. Now, what do those two have to do with polymathy? Everything. Because working in a deli at a young age, now remember, I have the stress of having to earn a living at a very young age in the background. And in front of me are customers that are coming at me who are all older than me. Some are in a hurry, some are friendly, some are not so friendly. And before I knew it, I started to develop the ability to relate to people, even when I didn't want to. If you sit, I don't know if any of you have ever driven a taxi. What a way to learn about people. People get in the back seat of your car. You can tell by the way they're dressed. I live in New York. So often in the morning, if I'm doing a morning shift, I'm driving people to the train station. Based on the way that they're dressed, I know whether they're going to Main Street or Wall Street. And little by little, I would start to converse with people. And I found that the conversations went everywhere, even if I didn't know the first thing about the subject. The hard part was breaking the ice, still being relatively young, and then being willing to talk to somebody who was twice my age, somebody who I knew is quite educated, going down to Wall Street, there's doctors, lawyers, et cetera, in the cab. But what happened over time, similarly in the deli, is I began feeling comfortable communicating with people. And that is the glue for how I learn. Couple that with my dad's passing, it created a very strong emotional bond when I learned something. The intro to this meetup had me mention that I learned some architecture through the study of the Tao Te Ching. Now, how did that come about? I was a Taekwondo practitioner. And in the Taekwondo dojang, the yin yang sign, or the yang in Korean, is everywhere. It's on the patches, it's on the wall, it's on the flags. And I was studying with a master there who said to me one day, he pointed to the symbol and he said, I see that in everything. And he eventually taught me about balance, both physically and mentally. And he also taught me how to deal with superiors. There was a grandmaster running the dojang of world renown, which was interesting because it brought up the conflict, those of us who were studying the Tao Te Ching, between Confucius and Lao Tzu. The grandmaster running the dojang was very rules oriented. He had a like I said, a background. He had a pedigree that he defended, and I understood why he did. And the dojang ran like a clock, very rigid. The master I was studying with would occasionally sit on the mat and play chess with me. He would talk to me about Taekwondo in exchange for some English comments. So I learned a great deal about being a bridge, if you can put that in your minds, speaking with him, a bridge between my body and my mind, a bridge between this young master who was a bit irreverent and this very authoritative grandmaster. So when I learned and first started to study the Tao, I saw a bridge. So then I attended a Louis Sullivan meetup with Shrikant. I had no idea who Louis Sullivan was. Turns out to be one of Shrikant's favorites. I'm in the meetup and there were two architects there. And as I'm listening, I realized what I learned from the Tao, the idea of there being a bridge or a connection. In my mind, that is exactly what an architect does. An architect, in my mind, is the bridge between the engineer and the artist, which, related to my chess teaching, something I've always talked to students about. When you're playing a game of chess, you are both an artist and an engineer. You may have something in front of you that you think is quite interesting, aesthetically pleasing, but does it work? You have to calculate on the chessboard. So the aesthetics appeal to the artist in you, but the engineer on the chessboard gets the last say. It has to be cleared for takeoff. So the idea that I studied the Tao instantly connected me in that Louis Sullivan meetup and gave me the courage to not only attend it, but to ask the architects, do either of you ever feel out of balance where you're being maybe too artistic and ignoring the structural aspects, or being too technical and what you're producing doesn't have any aesthetic value? So that's the connection. The second connection that I mentioned in the intro was how a comment in this very meetup about, I'm losing my train of thought here, science fiction, led me to talk in great detail with my brother about precision machine work. It was actually Deborah G. who made the comment with Mark, another participant tonight, in a breakout room about the movie Contact and Carl Sagan. I had read the book Contact years ago, but her comment about Sagan led me to think about the book Contact, which led me to think about the movie Contact, if you've seen it, with Jodie Foster and Matthew McConaughey. At the end of that movie, and in the book as well, Jodie Foster, through these wormholes and various means, finds her way to Vega, where she actually meets her dad, who has passed away years ago. That transaction brought me right back to my own father, who was a tool and die maker, highly skilled machinist. The next day, I shared that story with my brother. That conversation led us to the difference between when my dad was doing tool and die work with micrometers, with calipers, measuring things to 1,000th of an inch by hand, to today, when my brother has continued the business. He's a manufacturer, but most of his machinery is computer controlled, where the hardest job that he has is at night programming the machines for the next day. Now, if the computers go down, based on the way he was raised, he will be able to produce the product with a miller and a lathe without it being computer controlled. Now, when I started to think about this from a personal perspective, the word polymathy came to mind because I saw it here. I listened to Dr. Cortellesa. I listened to the Bernsteins. I actually have their book, Sparks of Genius. This is really, really taking hold for me. And I listened to their interviews and they put me at ease right away, because for me, polymathy was Da Vinci and the others. And I'm certainly no Da Vinci, but what they did very, very well in these meetups is they put us at ease, the way Shrikant had done for me as a speaker. They put me at ease saying polymathy is not this deep expertise across several platforms. It's a spectrum, and we're all probably on it one way or the other. As a matter of fact, the purpose of tonight is to try a little bit of an experiment where I'm going to model for you two very specific areas of my life where I had some expertise as a younger person. One is baseball, and the second is drumming. The third modeling is going to be from all of you, where I'm going to show you a chess position. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to ask the group to do it. I'm going to show you a chess position, and I'm going to ask you all to see how many different disciplines or ideas you can apply to the picture that you're seeing. And then I'll ask for a couple of volunteers, or Shrikant will do this, where we'll go around the group to see if we can get some volunteers to talk about how they take their own perspective of mastery in one area and take us down. Show us some depth, share your emotion if you can about what it is that you experience in that topic. Let's say it's language arts. I'll just use an example. Somebody, a lot of us here are bilingual. Maybe you could share what it's like speaking English as a second language and what it took, because that's part of the polymathic scale. And Howard Gardner would be the other. It's one of the intelligences, the linguistic side of the way we think and use intelligence. So if you're bilingual, you're already putting yourself in a special area. Well, what if you're bilingual and you're good at math? So maybe there's a mathematician here who could speak collectively and bring us down. So if we have 5 or 6 examples of that, then we'll go to the breakout rooms and you all can kick around what you pick up from our collective polymathy. Do you see connections between one presentation to the other? Do you find an emotional connection or some common thread to how maybe you're good at math because you play the piano? Is there a connection there? And then hopefully at the end of those meetups, the breakout rooms will come back and we'll do some takeaways about that process. So Shrikant, before I show those pictures, if you have any comments or...
Sure, this is delightful, Mike. I mean, this is amazing. I'm very much looking forward to this. I just like you told the story of finding and kind of becoming a part of 52 Living Ideas. I want to tell a story about you showing up. Okay, I remember that was like couple of days before my Art of Learning presentation. And I try to talk to people who are coming in, the new people who are coming in, to get to know them a little bit, make them feel comfortable, make them feel part of what we're doing. And I quickly, and it was delightful that it turned out that just like Josh Waitzkin, who wrote that book, you are like a scaled version, both in chess and in martial arts,
right,
and deeply familiar with both chess, martial arts, and the work of Josh Waitzkin, a lot more than I am. So I'm always delighted to find somebody who is better than me, because that's actually the best context for learning. And I also noted that you said that you like improvisation in our first conversation. So I said, okay, we're doing this on Sunday. Let's do this together. Okay. Right. And that was amazing. That was amazing. Okay. You're talking about interpersonal skills. My interpersonal skills are nowhere as good as yours. Okay. Because I don't have that much experience, but it is source of such joy and such learning. Because when you actually connect with people, you can actually learn much, much faster. That's the whole purpose of doing this 52 living ideas. So this idea of polymathy and interpersonal, when you're talking about that interpersonal skills are the glue for you, this is the first time I thought about it, that it is connected to polymathy in a very deep way. Because if you want to be polymathic, the best way to do that is to develop interpersonal skills so that you can interface with a whole bunch of people with different skills than yours. And so it just opens up the possibilities. So I'm very excited about doing this. And folks, all the demonstrations that we're doing are very easy, okay? Easy going. We are going to go back and forth. So don't, feel free to volunteer for the demonstrations. We'll pick a few volunteers. We won't go into too much detail because I'm trying to time the whole thing so that we have enough time after the breakout rooms to talk about your takeaways, your questions. So we're going to explore this. So this is going to be hands-on polymathy, okay? So with that, let's continue.
Okay, before I continue and share my screen, I have another book on my desk, and this is a 500, it's supposed to be top poem somewhere that I picked up yesterday. So it wasn't part of tonight's prep. And the reason I picked it up was because of these Tao Te Ching meetups that we have. We have several participants that read the Tao in their own language. And I know Margarita, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. She's here tonight, and she was reading in Indonesian. I don't remember which part of the language. We've had Margarita speak in Spanish, and then Kevin and Jason and others speak in traditional Chinese. And to my ears, I hear a poem. That's how it appears. I don't understand a word they're saying. My Spanish is not terrible, so I understand a lot of what Margarita is saying, but I do not understand the other languages. Yet, my ears are just in tune, because to me, it's sing-song, which prompted me to now, I can't recite one poem. But again, this seems to be this stepping stone process that's taking place. So let me share the screen, because I'm going to model two. Okay, I'll clean this up for you. You should see the picture of a young lady.
Yes.
Over a chessboard. Okay, let me fix that up a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to be modeling for you baseball and drumming, but a couple of pictures to start about where I am today. This is my goddaughter, who is the daughter of an international master named Rusa Golatiani. She was my business partner. So, Shrikant, she was the woman I talked about in The Art of Learning that made the critical mistake twice. That's her daughter. And this kid, you can't tell from this picture by looking at it, is a tremendous improviser. She's goofy, she's funny, she has a great sense of humor, yet she also has the ability to play chess and concentrate. She has no idea I'm taking the picture, and you can tell that this is not a professional. This is snapped from an iPad, no cropping. This is her playing chess. But it gets a little deeper. Her family is from the Republic of Georgia, and I'm very close with the family. As a result of me teaching chess, which is played all over the world, I've had contact with people and players from all over the world. Eastern Europeans, if you go back, oh boy, in the 1900s into the early 20th century, the world's greatest players were coming from Eastern Europe, Russia specifically. And now in modern times here in the States, you have a great deal of strong Chinese players and Indian players. And I have access to all these people. I'm in their homes. I'm teaching their kids. So I'm there for chess, but surrounding this whole process through the conversation, the same kind of conversations I was having in the taxi cab or the deli, I'm now having with the parents of my students. They're in waiting rooms. And I've learned to know when they're in a hurry because I drove a taxi. So if they're in a hurry, I'm not going to chat them up. But when they're not in a hurry, the same skill that I had as a taxi driver or working a deli counter would kick in, and we start talking more about life. And what does that do for me as a teacher? I learn who the parents are. If I learn who the parents are, it can only help me teaching the kid. So that's why I have a picture of my goddaughter there. The next one, you see me in the foreground on the right, is, if you look carefully at the faces, I hope they're clear enough, is a group of amateur improv performers about to go on stage in front of 200 people in a very tight space. We're probably all terrified on the inside, yet we're all smiling, and they're genuine smiles. This happened from joining an improv group from someone I met at the chess club in Norwalk. Again, how these things overlap. And without naming names, there is a chess teacher there. There's a graphic designer. There is an acting coach, a voice coach. There's IT. The woman all the way back in the middle is an ex-RN, now rescuing dogs, and I could continue. So again, the same process for me. The reason we're smiling is because even though on the inside we have the pre-stage butterflies, we all really like each other. And the show went very, very well, considering it was the first time for all of us. Improvisation for me was born out of laziness originally as a teacher. Teaching chess, there was no standard curriculum. So my boss would constantly say, you have to write curriculum, you have to write it. And I didn't like it. I didn't like going into a classroom of kids with a set list of things to teach them, because kids are like, every class is different. So I became a natural improviser, mostly from, I have to admit, being lazy. But then eventually it led to a great, and as a drummer, I was also big into improvisation. The next picture is taken from a team tournament that I was on. And in the foreground on the left is an ophthalmologist, a surgeon, a doctor with tremendous pedigree. He and I have talked a great deal about medicine. He's not only my student, he's a dear friend. And he's a very, very smart man, polymathic thinking constantly, so many different subjects. And we talk a lot because we like each other. If you look carefully at that picture, can you see who he's playing on the right side of that picture? It's a 5-year-old. And if you look even closer, I'm sorry, the picture isn't bigger. The kid's sitting in a booster seat. He's in a booster seat. Now, he happens to be the highest rated kindergartner in the country at the time this was taken. That doesn't change the fact that you have this highly accomplished man on the left playing a 5-year-old boy. Fred won the game, but he had to work his tail off to win the game. What is happening over that board fascinates me. That a 5-year-old could play a grown man of that pedigree. To me, it's language-based. Chess, to me, the moves get individually made, but they get chunked, much like a word becomes a sentence and a sentence becomes a paragraph. For a musician, there's a lot of commonality in Prodigy with young musicians. What's the commonality? To me, it always feels like they're manipulating the language. And now to the first one. When I put this picture up, it dawned on me that the Philadelphia Society would be here. And the Philadelphia Phillies just took my beloved New York Mets out of first place. But I didn't have the courage to take Jacob deGrom down. I have to face the flame, all you dear Philly fans. Now, why is Jacob deGrom up there? When I was 12 years old, my idol would have been Tom Seaver. I go back a few years, not Jacob deGrom. And I was a pitcher. So I want to give you first an emotional dive from baseball. When you're a pitcher in baseball, as he is here, in Little League, I played on a field that was called Durario Field. I was raised in New Rochelle, New York. Durario Field looked like a major league stadium to us. It was fenced in. It had home run fences, an electronic scoreboard, dugouts. So for us to be kids there, we would go there maybe 4 times a year we played. It was a great treat. Now, as a pitcher, we are the first player to touch the ball. So I would walk out to the mound where Jacob is standing now. The ball would be placed at the rubber. I would pick the ball up and ceremoniously turn my back to home plate, look at the scoreboard, and smell the ball. And I'm telling you this story today, and this happened more than 40 years ago, probably closer to 50 years ago. Why would I smell a baseball? I could ask some of you and you would know. It has a very distinctive smell, a brand new baseball. Then I would turn around, I would clear some of the dirt from the rubber so that I can begin my warm-up pitches. And to an outsider looking at that, say someone who doesn't play baseball at all, you probably know who the pitcher is and you're watching this 12-year-old kid warm up. But there are people in those stands and in those dugouts that are very interested in what I'm doing. Me, of course, I'm already tweaking what I'm doing physically. My brother was my coach, an older brother is in the stands watching me as if like a pro would do. My coach in the dugout is watching me. And then there are 2 other people, or 3 other. One would be the catcher on my team. But the other 2, one is the umpire. The umpire would crouch down behind the catcher to watch my delivery. And they do that because they're responsible for judging the balls and strikes. So by watching me warm up, the umpire is getting a feel for what I'm about to do. The other person is the batter that is on deck, who's going to be hitting first. They are in the on deck circle, physically swinging the bat in rhythm with my motion. Again, to an outsider, that seems like, what is this about? This is just about a kid warming up, but inside the game of baseball, that little ceremony is quite deep. Now take it to how I got a pretty good high baseball IQ, and I got it by creating a game within a game. What do I mean by that? So the baseball, the hard ball is hard, but we would practice on the streets with rubber balls. I was born in '62. So the block that I grew up on was filled with kids. So we would play outside all the time. What I would do with the baseball is I created a game within a game. I would take the ball, throw it against my front steps. If you can imagine the piece of slate, some stucco, a piece of slate, some stucco, wrought iron on the side. I would take a garbage can, put it on a step about the same height as the batter that I would be facing as a pitcher. I would throw the rubber ball into the steps, and depending on where the ball hit, it would come back to me in several different ways. It might come back as a ground ball that I would field. Now I'm becoming a shortstop or an infielder. Sometimes it would hit the point of the slate and go up in the air, and then I would catch it. Meanwhile, while all of this is going on, there are cars coming down the street. It's not going to happen today. Back in 1969 or 72, my mother was inside watching TV. Her son was outside throwing a baseball at the steps with cars whizzing by. She didn't care. The only time she'd care is when the ball would hit the point and go back and hit a window. That happened a few times. So what happened was, because I'm outside and I'm focused, because the cars are coming by and I'm creating this game, I was actually practicing rudiments, the necessary steps to becoming a good baseball player. You might say, boy, that kid is out there practicing 2 hours a day. I wasn't practicing at all. I was in what the Friday group would call flow. I was playing. I created a game within a game. And just by the act of repeating these things over and over, my baseball IQ accelerated. I'll do the next one. This is not really a flashy picture. This is a picture of a practice pad. Around the same time, I was a drummer and I got pretty serious around the age of 13 or 14. Drummers have rudiments, basic strokes that they have to use. You can think of them visually as follows. Think of an alternating stroke, right, left, right, left, right, left. That's simple. Those are called single stroke rolls. Now imagine me doubling that. Right, right, left, left, right, right, left, left, and now a hybrid. Right, left, right, right, left, right, left, left. That's called a paradiddle. Layer onto those basic strokes, accents, little rolls, changing your time, and you start to create what you see being performed on the drums, which is flashy. There are tom-toms and cymbals and, well, boy, it looks great. But the picture you're looking at is where all the work takes place. Now, how did I create a game within a game here, which created a lot of depth for me as a drummer? I had a teacher who would not let me on the drum set. He was very strict, and I was forced to just do hours and hours and hours of these rudiments with a metronome. So the musicians all know practicing with a metronome creates rock solid time, keeping tempo. But I was already playing in bands, and I didn't like doing that all the time. So what I started to do was I started playing these rudiments, and I would practice diligently, but I played it to real music, to albums. So what was happening is I was practicing the rudiments, but I wasn't doing it with a metronome. I was doing it with a human heartbeat, which is what time is in music. There are humans that are, the bass player and the drummer are interconnected. And by playing to live music in my headphones, I was able to not only do the rudiments, but the amount of time that I spent on the pad increased because I enjoyed it. And then what I would do when I finally got on the drum set is I would turn the lights down and put one light on in the front, and it created a stage. And by doing that, I was mimicking what happened to me on the weekend when I played a gig with a performer. So there are my two examples of taking baseball, both from an emotional standpoint, a technical standpoint, the same thing with the drums, where we start at the surface, and I just took us down for a little bit of a dive. I'm going to now show you the following, and I'm going to ask you to do it. So when I get this sized correctly, you should see a chessboard, and you should only see pawns with no other pieces on the board. How's it look, Shrikant? Great. Great. So now I'd like for the interactive portion of the meetup to begin. Take a look at this. And if you happen to know something about chess, go as deep as you want. I would love to hear it. If you know absolutely nothing about chess, take a look at this and compare it to something. A discipline, a painting, mathematics, art. I don't want to prompt you anymore. Just take a look. Tell me what you see. And Shrikant, if you don't mind monitoring the...
Sure. So folks, Mike, I want to make sure I understand clearly and everybody understands clearly what we're trying to do. So let me put it in my own words and please correct. What we are doing here is we are not trying to solve a chess problem. We are trying to take this chess configuration and try to take a discipline and try to map that discipline onto this chess problem. Is that what you're trying to do?
That is correct. And you can run it across sports, you can art, science, math, whatever hits you.
Sure. So how about I be the first guinea pig?
Oh, I love it.
And I will go ahead and do that. I'll try to work through it in my own way.
Great.
I'm going to choose writing. And folks, go ahead and volunteer to kind of do this. As you know, we can't take that too many volunteers, but go ahead and put an exclamation mark and then put a topic that you would like to model. Okay. And as an example, I'm going to try to walk through it. We have not prepared anything for this. This is improvisational. So one of the dearest things that I do is writing. So, and I have some advantage because I did play chess as a kid. In 11th grade, I made a deal. Actually, in 10th grade, I made a deal with my parents that in the way in which it works in India is 10th grade is important and 12th grade is important. So I made a deal with my parents. I'll study very hard. I was a good student. I studied very hard in 10th grade and 12th grade, but 11th grade, leave me alone. I will do whatever I want to do because it really doesn't matter how well you do. And one of the things I did was chess. And I played chess up to a point where I could dream entire games. And I would wake up screaming, don't do that, don't do that. It's the wrong move, okay? So I have some advantages of, kind of analyzing this, but I'm not using all of that, okay? I'm not going to use that. So I'm going to look at it as writing, okay? White is my piece, okay? That's what I'm trying to do. This is me writing. The beginning is left and the ending is right. Okay, so there are these, the entire writing is divided into these sections. And I have to, when I'm writing a piece, right, it's essentially it is beginning, middle, and end, okay? The beginning and middle, beginning and end are the most important. So I'm going to put them three each from the beginning and the end, okay? So I have to, and whom am I playing against? I'm actually playing against multiple readers of this. There are different kinds of readers who are going to play against me in the sense that they are going to respond to what I'm writing, okay? So I can evaluate, usually what I do is that I have a bullet point structure of writing where I have where am I going to start? Where am I going to end? What I have to do in the beginning is that I have to grab the attention of the people. The purpose of the beginning is to get the attention of the people. So I would look at the first, let me do it 2-2. 2 for the beginning, the first 2 on the left is the beginning and last 2 is the ending, okay? And I'm going to first design that. Okay, I'm going to make sure that I win on both this side and that side. And then I'm going to figure out how I'm going to do the arc in the middle, okay? So in the beginning, what I typically do is that I look at my audience and say, okay, what is their context? So you're actually looking at what the opponent is likely to be thinking. What is their context? Where are they coming from? And what's the entire variation of the context? Your audience is not just one person, it's a range of people with range of backgrounds. So I'm looking at them and saying, okay, what do I need to do here in order to make an impact? So that's the first thing I design. The last thing and the second thing I design is the end. What do I want people to walk away with? Okay, so I take care of the last 2 pieces over there. And there I'm saying, I have to say, okay, this is worthwhile. What am I trying to do? Suppose I'm writing a marketing piece, then I'm trying to get them to actually buy something. If I'm doing informational piece, I'm doing like an editorial, then I want them to take some kind of action. So that's what I designed. So I would look at, again, where they are currently and what are they likely to do without my writing, and then what am I going to inspire them or motivate them to do at the end. And once I have achieved both these things, then it's the question of how do I get them. Initially, I've established where they are, then I've established where I want them to go. And then it's a matter of just rest of the pieces, the 4 pieces are going to be just doing the progression. So I would focus on these 2 sides coming in and then in the middle. So that's my take. Mike, any comments, any thoughts?
That's terrific. The chess is a very rich language. So if you were to write about one of your games, I'd be curious about that. You know, we'll play a game one day and then you can put into prose what it is that you just explained here. Yeah, it's very, very interesting that you see the counterpart, your audience, you know, not necessarily giving you what you want. You actually have to work with them as well. Yeah, I thought that was really, really a great start.
Wonderful. All right. So let's say, so there's going to be Ambika, Deborah, and Fahad. What fields would you like to talk about? Let's start with Ambika. Ambika, go ahead. Let me see.
Sorry. Hi, sorry about that.
No problem.
When I first saw the board and the chess pawns, it reminded me of the Qawwali. And I don't know how many of you know what a Qawwali is, but it's a song sequence where you have two groups of people and it's a call response. Typically, let's just say one group consists of men and the other group consists of women, which is typically what happens with a Qawwali. And there is a competition, and you know, he's going to tease and she's going to answer, and it becomes very playful. And then all the drumming and the harmonium, and somebody may dance, but it's typically done seated unless the dance component is separate. And then it makes me think about call response even in other traditions here locally. Although I have not experienced that as much, and Qawwali typically in movies. And as I watched that play out in my mind a little bit more, I thought about what if, you know, because these are about riddles as well. They would ask riddles, and then the whole thing is that the women are certainly going to outmatch in most of these because they're romantic in some of their answers. And what if one person arose as a trickster, and we don't know which one that is, that just came to mind, who would actually take us in a different direction of another, you know. And then this model, because it's so fluid and yet fixed, it has both those qualities, could even be used for certain conflict. I don't want to get into conflict resolution, it's just so blasé right now, but to think in terms of a creative solution to something, with that trickster character who would show up, and then that person would create this new thing. And even though I have not studied architecture, I make little sketches. I've just retired from teaching, and I'm a writer and a painter, and for me, everything comes back to architecture because it's about space, time, and the elements. And so that's in poetry and music. And so what if we actually played this physically, not just on Zoom, because then it would be more interesting, because we could even add the component of getting up and getting into movements for interpretation.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you,
Great.
Amrita.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, Shrikant, can I just comment?
Please.
For a moment. So Ambika, one thing that's really struck me is that when you were telling that story, I don't know if you can see yourself in the camera, but you had a really big smile on your face. So it felt like you were really going back to when this really took place. And you actually nailed two very technical aspects of chess, where chess is considered to be a study of time, space, and force. Those are the quantifiable aspects of the game. And you hit two of them. You hit time and space. And if you look at the board, and you also mentioned architecture.
Yes.
So as soon as you say that, I see structure. So
Yeah.
Thank you. That was absolutely a perfect response to what we have on the board. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Can I just add one tiny thing?
Sure.
Sure.
Notice that there are 7 of each. And so in the game, they could be paired up. But then when we have the trickster, it becomes interesting.
Thank you. Let's go with Deborah next. Deborah, go ahead.
Okay, hi. So this might be a very literal interpretation of the imagery, but when I saw it, I thought of two things. So I thought of either kind of like waves, like if you're looking at it kind of like with crests and troughs, because if you look at the top line, I guess with the black pawns, it looks like that could be, the top of it basically, and then going down. And I feel like that could be, I don't know, in terms of, I guess, you could talk about it in terms of science. I feel like it's a broad way of putting it. You could say that it's like, I don't know, waves of like if there were an earthquake or, I mean, I don't know, really any kind of waves, sound waves, microwaves, whatever. Any kind of like electromagnetic waves, I guess. Or a song too. And this is similar, I think, Shrikant, to what you were saying, or at least how I interpreted it in terms of writing or story. So, yeah, so it looks, especially, I feel like the black and the white both look like this, but almost like there's an intro if each one represents a part of a song, or something that's building. And then it's sort of like there's dynamic action happening. So on the top, it's more like a pattern, I guess, but on the bottom, it seems sort of like a crescendo at the top. Like, I realize it doesn't really reach there, so I don't know how it would jump from the 3 to the 4th, like the 3rd one to the 4th one, but it sort of looks like that. And then coming back down. And what I thought was interesting was that if you look, they both sort of, they don't exactly mirror each other on the top and the bottom, although it does go from 2 in the beginning to 1 at the end for the black, and then 3 to 2. So it does seem like it's kind of reaching an equilibrium, even if it's not exactly equal. But I thought, yeah, I don't know if there's necessarily a connection between those, except that it did sort of remind me of that yin yang thing where like this dynamic action and then sort of reaching equilibrium, or that things are going up and down. And yeah, I don't know. I guess that's what I saw when I looked at it.
Very good.
Mike, go ahead.
Yeah. So Deborah, again, your comment as you lead this into music, where you're almost seeing song. For those of us who read music, if you read music, what you're doing is you're looking at something like this, and as Deborah alluded to, some musicians actually hear the notes, but others read them. You just read the notes. And here, this is a song, because if you see a chess player solving a chess puzzle, all they're doing is looking at little figurines, black and white, and finding a pattern within that and either playing it as a musician or solving it as a chess player. What is really the difference between a chess position that's printed and music on the staff? It's white paper, black lines, and instead of notes being placed in certain places, there are chess pieces. So again, I'll try to come back with all of you. So Deborah, as you saw the sing-song of the position, it leads me into thinking of actually literally reading music.
I can see that. Yeah.
Yep.
I didn't even think of that, but that makes sense. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we're going to go with Dr. Fahad. Fahad, go ahead.
Well, yeah, when I looked at this, I felt like this is actually kind of represent a society. So, and regardless what that society is, so if you look at the bottom, so what the society does, it puts people into hierarchy. So at the bottom, you see that white society where there's one on the top, and then the bottom there's one, and then there's more on the bottom, and that's how actually every hierarchy works, because the top normally are way few, and then the bottom way more people. And then I thought about the black ones. Those are the rebels. They're saying like, no, we don't care what your value system is. We're gonna do our own thing. And we have friends. So some of them, they have friends. They support their rebellion side. And yeah, it's just like, in my mind, it was fascinating how it's being organized. So that's my take on it.
That's terrific. And if I may, again, I'll just try to latch on to what everybody's saying and add something else. So Fahad, what happens as chess players on the board is there is a hierarchy. So these are all pawns. So we know in English, we say you're just a pawn in the game. We are the lowest denomination on the board. And it's interesting that the center pawns, the ones that are on the D and E line, tend at the beginning of the game to be the most important because they control the center of the board. It's where all the action is, right? But if you don't play chess, it's nice to know that if one of these pawns reaches the other side of the board successfully, it can turn into any piece it wants, including the most powerful piece which is the queen. So at the beginning of the game, this little A pawn, I don't know, you have to let me toggle it. This little pawn here, when the board is filled with pieces, has very little to do in the game. It might move here to attack a bishop. It might come here to prevent a piece from coming to this square. But if you can imagine a lot of these pieces coming off the board, if this one is free to run, so imagine these two not on the board, this is going to be the hardest pawn to catch because it's on the outside. So it starts his life very low on the side without much to say. But at the end of the game, very often, it leads the charge. Thank you, Fahad. That was great.
Yeah, thank you so much. I found that actually very much literal. And also it can give you a lesson too. Like even if you feel at certain point of life you are at the bottom of the hierarchy, you can actually lead and be at the top if you wanted to.
That's what I'm hoping that we do here tonight. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Next up is going to be Vanessa, followed by Charlie. Vanessa, what do you see?
Okay, initially when I was just looking at the pieces, the white pawns made me think of soft serve, and looking at the black, it was like the silhouette of a grandmother in a Looney Tunes. And that made me think of the grandparents and how the bottom is kind of very structured. You know, these are the rules you follow, everything in order, you know, do as I say, maybe a nice little treat. And the upper is kind of a little more haphazard, you know, go with the flow. It's been a while since I played chess, but looking at that, it seems that, you know, if you're just playing with the pawns, that setup would not be possible. Like in the way, like I said, I had to fiddle around with it, or either that you were missing the pawn, you know, each one was missing one. You realize, okay, we each have to start off with the same. So just kind of how life could be haphazard and either like, this is how we're going to have a little fun, you know, go a certain way, versus like I said, and even like when I first looked at it, I saw it looked like a staircase down below. So the one is kind of very rigid and the other one's a little more like free flow, kind of like, you know, grandparents, you know, if you have a set one, you know what to expect, and even despite you don't know which way the game's going to go. You come the end of the day, you think you're getting ice cream and you end up going to the zoo, or you're in bed way before your bedtime because you're so tired you don't have any energy left. So my 2 cents.
Thank you. Thank you, Vanessa.
Great. And Vanessa, these your comment about it looking like a grandmother on top, in chess, these little pawn structures that I have here have very specific names. And sometimes they're based on physical features. They're based on names of where things come from. So that observation is quite important here. It has a name. I'll reveal it, or maybe somebody else will before I get to it. So thank you, Vanessa.
Thank you. Next up is going to be Charlie, followed by Kevin. Charlie.
Okay, can you hear me first of all?
Yes.
Okay, good. I have a background in the physical sciences as well as many other things. And the first thing that came to mind was a channel flow. You know, so you have a flow of a fluid going through a channel, and I'm thinking the fluid is flowing from right to left. Okay, and the structuring of the black pawns and the white pawns is as the fluid is flowing past there, it's going to set up an eddy. Okay, that's like a whirling, like a whirlpool, and so it's putting that into a more human sort of way, that we could think of our group as being something like that, where the white pawns are a constraining condition as to, you know, how are things supposed to work, the function and the purpose of the group, and then this coming in, flowing into the situation are the background and the proclivities and so on of each of the people in the group, and that sets up this flow that is kind of circular. And one of the things I'm really interested in is hermeneutics, and especially applied to psychology. That you have this, you can see it. It's like a human body is like an eddy, in the sense that the actual molecules in our bodies are completely changed every 7 years, and most of them, I know it's 80% are changed every 2 years. So that in a sense we're a flowing structure, and in terms of physical matter, okay? And so that I was thinking that this is, you know, the kind of, this just made it pop into my head, this idea of a current eddy, and how a group has flowing into it all the experiences, present and past and future, of the people who are involved in the group, and the white pawns symbolize a structuring of how the group is going to focus its energy, and then that those four squares that are in that hole, so to speak, is the eddy that circulates around through the group, that is a result of the structuring from the white pawns, but also it's because of the dynamics of the fluid flow itself, which, you know, is like, you know, corresponding to the experience of the people coming into the group, and so on. Anyway, that's kind of how I saw it.
That was terrific. Charlie, would you mind telling me, can you read the board? Is it clear enough to tell me when you said the four squares? Can you tell me particularly what squares you were talking about?
Okay, you have the white pawns that are going up, okay? Yeah, the four squares are the two right on top of that white pawn.
This one?
No, the next two to the right,
Here?
There. Yeah, there. That one, the next one to the right. Well, that one too, that one and that one. Yes.
Those four.
Those four, right.
Right.
So there's a flow is coming in from the right. Those white pawns are going to push the fluid into this cavity, okay, that's formed by the group, okay, and so that's. You know.
Yeah, thank you very much, Charlie. And if any of you have played the game Battleship as kids, this is all this is. We use an algebraic grid, so I don't know if the letters are coming through, but the squares that I lit up, the one that I'll leave lit up is just E5. And if you could read the letter E, and then it connects to the number 5, and then it's E5. So if you want to talk specifically about squares, that would also be really cool.
Wonderful. Next up is Kevin.
Okay, let's move to the E5. If white move there, it's go to that, right? So that's not the way. But I'm going to use my way. This game, the game started perfect. 8 pawn. However, start changing the pattern, and they start imperfect life kind. But for this pattern here, look like a fair game. Everyone got 7 pieces, pawn. But one good thing for them is no pressure. You don't need to protect the queen. Nowhere you see the queen. So it's not a real game for them. Another side from yesterday, it's like yin and yang, ourselves. You think about our own life self. Let's see if you consider white side, let's see, face to ours. You make each move, that's the choice. How do you balance this? You move something, you could be lost the balance, lost the harmony and pattern. It's not just each pawn important, also the relationship connected with each other, protect each other, and the challenge here is how do you use this from let's see, left side we got 3. We didn't, it's ideally would be that 3 connect to the left 4. It's impossible. So that's your dream. It cannot come to true. So you have to let 4 work together. How to compete on above is 4, 5. You got an advantage out of 3, but another 2 is far away. So how to use the balance the left side and right side. Also try, let's move, how do you make the first choice to move? I know that's here, this most important space is E5, 5E. Michael mentioned that. The D part, the most important, we lost the pawn. Yeah, you're going to move that part. That's if from white side possible, that's right move. If I'm on the white side possible. Okay, you change the pattern here.
Yeah. Just to see, yeah, like, so
Yeah.
when I change that, what does that do for you, Kevin?
if you're doing this, I'm going to take to a little bit aggressive from a right side, which I'm going to move to G3G.
To this square?
No, 3G is ABFG, right? Because here challenge, you move the left side, which area that side move, another side you should think about. So if the 3G, I move one step.
Like here?
Yeah.
Aha.
The reason being I don't move let's 2 steps because we need later on put a CVF to 1 step to challenge that center element.
That's great. So Kevin is a chess player, it seems.
Okay.
And which is great. So, but what I want to do is just dribble in a little of real chess for those of you who don't play. So these pawns are able to take things diagonally going forward, 1 box away. So if I were to push this pawn here, do you see that it would be 1 box away from black, which could take me? So pawns move straight, but they take diagonally. Earlier in Kevin's analysis, he mentioned something about if you randomly push this pawn. So if I leave it here, based on how it captures, it's technically controlling that square. If anything from the black side landed on G3, this pawn could take it. If you push this pawn, you've weakened this square. White doesn't have any pawns that can protect these squares. In chess language, we would say that white has a dark squared complex of squares that are weak. And whether or not black's pieces can infiltrate on those squares would depend on the position. Keep in mind that I'm going to show you where this position came from when we're done with our analysis. But Kevin, thank you for that. It gives us an opportunity to talk about going forward. Sometimes leaves weaknesses behind you. You have to be careful. So yeah, I thought that was great, Kevin. Thank you.
Okay.
Mike, this is going very well. So how about we take 2 more? Is that okay?
Sure. Perfect.
Okay, it's going to be Madeline followed by Joe. Madeline.
Yes, hi everyone. Thank you, Mike. This is great. Very refreshing and fun. So when I looked at it, I didn't see any pattern between the black and the white. So I looked at the whole square. And what I saw it as is 1 big square unit. And I thought in terms of pattern formation. And regular pattern formation is called tessellation. It can be done with tiles. It can be done with a printed fabric in a block unit. And there are different ways of talking about how the basic unit is repeated. So if we look at this entire square, the whole chessboard as 1 flat unit, and you just imagine duplicating it exactly and putting it to the right so that it's abutting it, so it's contiguous, that's called translation. You're just moving it over. Now imagine that you are turning that right-hand unit upside down. That's called rotation. It could be at any of the 3 possible positions that could be rotated. Okay, so now slide it back in your mind, put them back together. So it's 1 piece again. And imagine that on the right-hand side, there's a hinge. And underneath it, there's an identical board. And what you're doing is you're flipping this over. It's as if you were looking in a mirror. That's called mirror. So there's translation, there's rotation, there's mirror. There's one other one, I can't think of it off the top of my head. So that would be for forming a pattern, a regular pattern on a surface. And the key to figuring out what's going on when you're looking at a complex pattern is to look for the repeating unit. So in something like an Escher drawing, where you're seeing this transformation going on, he usually has a hexagon, which is equilateral triangles as the repeating unit, and he's drawn into that.
It's terrific. Thank you, Madeline. So what we do as chess players sometimes, and I'll try to connect a little bit. So I can't do all the rotations that you mentioned. This I can do. And this is your opponent's perspective. Or for our purpose, this is the flip side of what we were looking at. And I was just curious before, so as Madeline mentioned, in your mind, can you flip something or create symmetry and the other things she talked about? Here, I just turned the board upside down. Does it happen to look any different from this perspective? Does anyone have a, because it's the same position. But that's
if anybody has a comment, just go ahead and type exclamation mark. Okay, you can come to it a little bit later on.
Okay.
Let's continue. If you guys think of it, you can do it later.
Sure.
Ambika, you had a very quick comment. Go ahead. Ambika, you need to unmute.
Okay, so this is just an image that flashed in my mind. You had flashed 5 and 6 ENF, I think. Would you light them up, please?
Sure.
Yeah, and that was a really nice shade of green.
This pattern?
and these two as well, 6 ENF as well. Okay,
Oh.
and then the 2H you had moved up one space. Would you mind moving that up? Okay. Oh,
I'll fix those.
okay, but yeah, but we would, okay. And maybe we can light up maybe 4 or, 3G or something. 3G and 4H maybe. Okay, 4H. So if you look at this pattern, we are seeing a heart from the top all the way down to the tip here to on the right side. But the little curve on the right side is off the charts. And we are looking at a new ice cream to unify the current culture divide in the United States of America.
Okay,
Thank
you.
And these people are waiting for the new ice cream.
Great, great.
Thank you, Ambika. Next up is Joe.
Thank you.
That was interesting. And when you flipped it, it kind of seemed like black had the advantage all of a sudden. That's when you flipped it before. I have a really kind of off the wall kind of thought that I'm thinking about this. And I think about this in terms of if I'm a business owner and you have 2 competing business owners that are essentially saying, where do I want to put my stores? And what territory do I want to go into? And they're my competitor. And so therefore, what's my next move? And what's the best, strategically? And I'm taking all the geography into place. So I look at the board as a map. And so this is how I strategically make my decisions as to, do I want to, break up another, their wall or something along those lines, or, or does it make more sense to go to an open space where they're not servicing an area, and why aren't they servicing that area? So you start asking yourself the questions that you really, why is this place open? What does my competitor actually want me to go there? And why is that area not getting serviced? So I start to think along the lines, or even I was thinking more along the lines of C6, and like that. Why are these areas open to begin with? And I don't play chess, so, or you could say D2 or something like that. it seems like these are being ignored for some reason. And that's just how my mind necessarily works. So
That's really really interesting, Joe. The difference between chess and, say, a game like poker, where chess there's perfect information. There are some things psychologically that could be going on behind the scenes between competitors, but in terms of what you have to deal with and make decisions, it's all in front of you. It's not like poker, it's perfect information. So what you're saying is, it's funny that Peter Thiel, Ken Rogoff, who worked for the Fed, Rogoff is a grandmaster, Thiel is a master. A lot of people in the business world playing chess, because my friend who I talked about, Russo, works now for BlackRock. She got hired originally. The interview process was sped along because of her ability as a chess player. She just calculates and anticipates very well, but she also does it exactly what you're saying. Instead of thinking about controlling a square, she can see in her mind about, an opponent controlling more, of a sales force, et cetera, and or their customer base. So I think it relates really well, Joe.
Yeah, and it was just trying to get into the idea, why is that person not occupying that area? And and then you're starting to think in terms of your opponent at that particular moment in time. So, and you have a closed system, which means you have a set of rules, which is actually the most interesting part, because you can answer that question. Otherwise, you couldn't, like with so many variables. That's the beauty of a closed system in a game, is that you can actually come to a conclusion like probabilistically. Whereas if you look at the world, there's too many, it's chaos that you're trying to.
Correct. Yeah. And interesting, so as human players, computers can sometimes get to the bottom of a position a lot easier than humans can. But for us, when we're playing, there is chaos on the board. We can't make sense of what we see. And we're trying to steer it toward a channel where we can make sense of it. And Shrikant, back to Josh Waitzkin, his style was always put chaos on the board. He would train with a lawnmower open in the noise, and because he wanted chaos on the board. He was very comfortable playing chess where other players do their best to stay away from that. Was there anybody else that wanted to comment on the board?
Right. Let's do one thing. We are at about 10:15. We've got several people who have already commented on the board. Do you want to do anything before we go to the breakout rooms?
Nope. Just quickly, let me see if this comes up. Give me one moment. And give me 1 second. Okay, so I don't know if you can, how much of this you can see. Can you see the commentary here on the right side?
Yes.
So the player here, Errol, is one of my students, and this person here is his opponent in the game. And this is the entire game that was played. And if I click this on, I can first take you to the beginning of the chess game here. And just to quickly, to Kevin's point, Errol put a pawn in the middle of the board. He wants to control the middle. And some things we didn't touch on were relating chess to sports, controlling the center of the board. But the position that's on the board now, look carefully at the pawn structure. It's the same exact structure I had on the board when you were analyzing. There's the tree. There's the song that Deborah saw. There are the 4 squares we talked about with the flow of water. This is weakening the G3 square. If this bishop is not on the board, this bishop works diagonally. So it controls any square forward, backward, as long as it's diagonal. If this bishop were suddenly to disappear or get traded, can you kind of see how these dark squares have been weakened? So the game of chess you're looking at is always played within a pawn structure. These little pawns basically tell you where you can and cannot go. And in future meetups, we can talk about a whole host of other aspects of playing chess. But that's it for here, Shrikant, unless there was anybody else that wanted to chat about like another dive or something, or if you think we've had enough, we can go to the breakout rooms.
I think let's go to the breakout rooms, because
Sure.
I want to leave the time on the other side for people to talk about, because then we'll talk about their takeaways, any questions that they have. So folks, what we're going to do, is there any, we have to give them some kind of direction for the breakout room?
Yeah, sure.
Go
So
ahead.
what you heard, if my initial presentation, I talked about baseball, and I took my emotional state and some technical aspect of baseball, and I just went a little bit deeper. I wasn't on the surface of baseball. And then I did the same thing with drumming. So collectively, amongst yourselves, there is an enormous amount of talent and experience here tonight. So during the breakout rooms, would it be possible for you to share some expertise that you have, or connect what you've heard tonight, find some connection between these different disciplines, and see if you can come away with either some questions or some analysis about living polymathy here tonight, not in the past, the subjects that we covered.
Excellent, excellent. So what we're going to do, folks, is that we're going to do breakout rooms for 20 minutes. And they're going to be facilitated by Mike, Deborah, and Joe. This format is let everybody speak, each person speak for about a couple of minutes, so that they can answer the question that Mike has put on the table. So we get all the perspectives on the table. And when you come back, you get to talk about, in the main room, you get to talk about your takeaway, and you can also put a question on the table. We'll collect all the questions and do a lightning round after that. All right, so we try to chew this topic as much as we can and get as much from everybody's insights as we can. All right, so starting the breakout rooms now. Welcome back, folks. Welcome back. All right, welcome back. Sorry, Deborah and Joe, I put you in the same breakout room by mistake. Sorry about that. All right, so what we're going to do now, just a second, I forgot to turn on my video too. What we're going to do now is to talk about our takeaways, very brief, maybe 1 to 1.5 minutes. And then if you have a question, you can go ahead and put the question on the table, and we'll collect all the questions. We won't answer the questions right away. We'll collect all the questions, and then we will try to answer them. All right, everybody gets to answer them. So that's the format. Go ahead and type exclamation mark if you would like to share your takeaway, or put a question on the table. Either is good. Or you can raise your hand in Zoom, whatever you prefer. All right, who would like to go first? Okay, it's going to be Vanessa followed by Joe. Vanessa.
Well, like I mentioned in the group, the difference of maybe learning through experience versus, let's say, book learning, you know, which is more important and which is maybe more practical and serves you better? Or is there really a difference over one over the other?
Between what two you're saying?
Oh, like learning through experience, like hands-on, like you may
Yeah.
not know the theory or the name, but you
Right.
can maybe apply it versus explain it.
Okay, so learning by experience, or
like book learning. Maybe
book
you know
learning.
the
Okay, very
theory
good.
and you can explain it like a professor, but maybe
Okay.
you can't actually do it.
Excellent. Thank you, Vanessa. Next up is going to be Joe followed by Deborah. Joe.
I mean, I mean, it was a fantastic presentation, Michael. It was awesome. I mean, and in the sense that how to make these connections essentially is what we really were thinking about. And essentially, what do you need to look at macro from a macro level, and what do you need to look at micro? What are the things that you really need to identify in order to make the connections across these disciplines and start to see how you can actually turn them into practices? Like, you know, the idea of how you were just pitching the baseball, that you were creating, you were replicating how to play all 9 positions essentially just by throwing, you know, and at the same time that, you know, there's a lot of other things that you were learning in that process in general. The other part is the interpersonal skills that are actually needed to glean a lot of the information that you need in order to actually make connections. Whether you're playing somebody in chess, whether you're pitching somebody in baseball, or whether you're even dealing with the catcher himself or the umpire, all those moving parts, I think are really important. If I had to leave a question, I would say, what are the most important skills that one person needs in order to make connections? Like, is it interpersonal skills that they need, or is it analytical? I mean, it's a combination. It really is. But if you had to pick one, what would it be? And that would be my question.
Excellent question. And thanks for the observations, but you stole all of Deborah's ones. Deborah, do you have anything more left to say after Joe?
I can give my personal examples because I had said the micro and macro thing. But to answer Joe quickly, I think the skills depend on.
No, don't answer. No, the
question. Sorry. Okay. All right.
Yeah, we're going to collect all the questions and then everybody gets to answer, Joe.
All right. So I'll give my examples, I guess, from my personal life about the micro and macro that I had brought up. So I think that for me, I have a lot of attention to detail. Like I pay a lot of attention to detail, and I feel like that comes through in things like how I do my makeup, how I remember dates in history, writing and grammar. Like I am definitely a real stickler about grammar, but writing in general, like the style of writing. But I also have memory for things like details in people's lives. And that sort of like brings together what Michael was saying before about an interest in people and connecting to people. And that really resonated with me because I feel like I do have just an overall interest in people and their narratives. So my interest in social science, I think, kind of marries the micro and the macro of that because I really like details, finding out how stories link together and like why people sort of tick or like what makes them tick. But at the same time, that overarching story and how we can connect to one another, I feel like those things come together for me. So that's an example of the micro and macro, I guess.
Wonderful. Thank you. Next up is going to be Charlie, followed by Ambika. Charlie.
What I heard, my takeaway was Michael started off talking about interpersonal skills, okay? And for me, that's right up my alley, okay? Because that's kind of where I am right now, where I've been for the last 30 some years. And and also kind of in response to what's the woman who was doing statistics. I also have a background in math. I almost completed a PhD in mathematics, in fact. And so I'm interested in this interplay between what you can call experience or imagination or whatever, and the other part which has to do with structuring, putting in structure based upon the patterns in which you see. So like the Bernsteins were talking about that whole thing about building models and stuff. They had all these different skills that they were talking about, and so it for instance, okay, if you're talking about human beings, it's really complicated. Okay, if you're talking about interpersonal relationships, try to build a model, a predictive model, especially. So Murray Gell-Mann, who won a Nobel Prize in physics for his work on quarks, started the Santa Fe Institute in New Mexico, where he's trying to develop this new type of model called complex adaptive systems. And in complex adaptive systems, you don't have any ability to do inference. Because all of statistics is based upon a fixed distribution. Okay, but you don't have that in complex adaptive systems, or agent-based models is another example. So I think that this is a kind of a wall that artificial intelligence is banging itself against at this point in time. That these attempts to anyway, I'm kind of getting a little bit off topic, but I'm interested in this interplay between the unstructured self, okay, which is the direct experience of what it is, okay, versus the more analytical model building thing, and so you have this like a conversation between these two things that are going on, and that's kind of my takeaways. Is that
wonderful?
That anyway.
What I'm going to do is that I'm going to put that as a question. What do you think? I'll put that as a question for everybody to answer. What do they think is the interplay between the kind of intuitive or experiential and the structural or analytical? Very good. Next up is going to be Ambika, followed by Fahad. Ambika.
I think nobody has spoken from the third group.
Anybody who wants to speak is welcome to speak. So they can go ahead and just type exclamation mark and speak.
Okay. So the point we just heard from, was it Charlie?
Charlie.
Charlie, and what you said to wrap it up, somehow stirs what I want to say, because we talked about the layout also on the chessboard, and Patricia made an interesting comment about how some of the gifts can be seen in a different time. And that made me reflect on if in an organization we have, let's say this project and these people are working on it, and then in reflection, these other the pawns that were sitting on the left side, their gifts can come in the reflective mode to take that further, and how we could work in that sense with the intuitive and the structural and the analytical to create something that satisfies the organization. Although I think the human potential is far more interesting and important, because that itself becomes the organization rather than the organization saying, create this. Because then it goes beyond the limitation of what they have wanted by using all these other capacities. So that's what made me look at the board differently after we had the discussion. So I don't know if I have a question in the moment, but I think it's, yeah, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Ambika. Next up is Fahad. Fahad, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think that brings me back having this cross-discipline thing that we have. It's kind of the order and chaos thing, that in everything, like the artistic side, that's where we're exploring the chaos, and we need to bring order out of that, and that satisfies big thing inside of us. And I think most of us maybe, and I notice we have actually technical, rigid, scientific background, but that is not enough for us. That's why we're exploring more artistic side. And I think being aware of that, and it is very valuable. And yeah, and I think all of us, we have this, we're not one thing, we are multi things in the same time going on, and we should give every side of us chance to explore that side. That's why you found some people who's very rigid things, they are actually dying from inside, because they want to explore more risk. They want to go and explore other artistic things where you can express yourself. So I don't want to, yeah, that would be my take on that.
Wonderfully put. And what we'll do is that I'll combine your observations with Charlie's to ask the question in that way. So it is kind of experience versus structure, artistic versus scientific, chaos versus order. How do you handle the interplay between this to have the best health, best growth, best life? Next up, let me see. Okay, so my takeaways, I got 3 points from Mike. The biggest point was the value of interpersonal skills and its connection with being a polymath or growth in general. Really, this is the easiest, the cheapest way of learning, to be open to the context of other people. Because what it does is that if you're open to it, and you have to be open to it, because the way we are constructed, whatever our weaknesses are, we will actually try to avoid seeing the strength in the other people. So you have to overcome your confirmation biases and things like that to do that. So that, interpersonal skills, that was one point. The second point was his point about simulation, use of simulation in order to build up skill. And that he talked about in the baseball example. And from his drumming example, the most intriguing thing I found was working with real music when you're practicing. That's huge. You actually should be doing things in the full living context, so that you're not just mechanically doing something, but you always have the grand picture of how everything comes together as an example, as a goal with you all the time, and then you practice within that. So those are the 3 big things that I got. Now, I think what we should do at this point, Mike, what I was, let me propose this. There are two really good questions that are kind of related. So one was Charlie's question and Fahad's follow-up on that about the interplay between the experiential and structural. And that's a point that you also made about the interplay between artistic and engineering. So artistic and engineering, chaos and order, how do you operate with that? So that's one big question. And the second one was Joe's question about skill for making connections. Not as one skill, but as, let's just look at it as a skill set. Okay, and maybe these two are connected in some way. So that is the question I want to put on the table. Mike, what do you think? I'm proposing to put that question on the table and let everybody give their takes. Mike, you're on mute. If you want to comment, go ahead.
I like them both, Shrikant.
Okay,
Both
so
questions.
let's start with the interplay between the artistic and engineering, or kind of experiential and structure, chaos and order. How do you do that in order to live a healthy life and an incredible life? So anybody who wants to say anything about that, you can go ahead and type a exclamation mark. Mike, if you want to comment on anybody's takeaways, you're welcome to do that.
Sure.
All right, folks, what do you think about this interplay? Madeline.
Okay, here's what I think about the interplay. I thought that Charlie's question just now went right to the point. When I looked at the screen, when I looked at the chess diagram was, I thought, what is it that's right here in front of me? It's a flat thing with a pattern. It's a square. What can be done with it? So what is it that's right here in front of me? And I was thinking in the same way when I was listening to Michael talk about all the different things that he's done. They all involve mastery, including even the precision machining. And they all have the two components that Charlie mentioned. One is the very experiential, I call it kind of a haptic component for Michael, combined with a very abstract level. So those two things are two things that for Michael go together. And as for how to integrate things in life, I think that Ambika spoke to that very well when she mentioned call and response, and that we're constantly shuttling back and forth between whatever our major skills are, whether it's Michael with the haptic and the abstract, or people with other types of things that go together like that we're doing a constant call and response within ourselves.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Madeline. Next up is going to be Vanessa, Joe, and Margarita. Vanessa.
Okay, when it comes to order and chaos, I think you have to be able to deal with both. You may be stronger in one than the other, but you get so rigid and you come into a stumbling block, you just may be like the bulldozer, wants to go fully ahead versus, let's say if you're working with something made out of rubber or elastic, it's pliable. You can maybe mold it, harden it a bit if you like roll it up or whatever, but it can maybe take different forms and it can be very adaptable. So you have to be maybe comfortable with both and, realize, okay, maybe you prefer one over the other, but if you're strictly in one, we know life does not follow rules. You can have the weather forecast and doesn't mean because you predicted it will come.
Wonderful. Thank you. Next up is Joe, Margarita, and Fahad. Joe.
Can you just really quickly repeat the question so I'm making sure that I'm okay?
Yes, what interplay do you need to have between your artistic side and engineering side?
Yeah.
How do you kind of be open to chaos and use the order? How do you kind of live in the moment experientially and have structure in your life?
I think about this, and this is a very narrow way of thinking about it, but I think that it kind of works as an analogy, is that how you have structured data that's in a schema, and you have unstructured data that is not, that requires a unique skill set for you to analyze it, for you to experiment with it. As an engineer, you need to have specialized tools. You need to be able to be open to new things. Whereas if you have predefined structured data, you have predefined models, and you can actually have rules of inference that are actually going to work for you, but there's roles for both of them. And the more that you become used to dealing with unstructured data, essentially, that's how you deal with chaos, and you're bringing order to that chaos in your own way. It's a really weird way of looking at it, but that's just an analogy that I can kind of use where, how people consume information. I think that's one way to think about it. It's weird, I know, I get it, but it does work if I explained it a little bit more clearly.
Wonderful, thank you, Joe. Next up is going to be Margarita, Fahad, Charlie, and Ambika. Margarita.
Okay, thank you. So for me, connecting the dots, one could be simultaneously, so happen at the same time, where you try to pick up the pieces and where those pieces fit into your reality, your context right now. It will be great, but I think connecting the dots can also happen consequently. So there are moments that you kind of inclined to do this, or pieces like fit more into this context, but other times differently. So this dynamic harmony will happen. And I think that's the beauty of being like living in different worlds. You got to come from here to there, you switch, you dance. And however, that can also create problem. Like our colleague back in our discussion said, it's not easy to express it, because using the terms from one world and to another world, that's sometimes chaotic in your mind. You just can't express it, but you can feel it. I think like Michael said, we all have this experience, polymathy, like different kind of experience kind of influencing us, but sometimes it's not easy to announce it, but yet we have it. The second point that I want to say, when I was able to connect the dots, I think it's usually more in idle times when my mind kind of, so connecting the dots is not something purposefully. Sometimes it's just when I don't think, the least moment, and when I think, then it starts aha moment. I can't find I find the understanding. But when I try to seek it too much, sometimes I just lost it. Maybe just, yeah, that's my mind.
Wonderful, thank you, Margarita. It's going to be Fahad and Jyoti. You have a very interesting observation. So after Fahad, I'm going to call on you to speak it out. Fahad, go ahead.
Yeah, so just like I have this, so I think having the order and understanding the order and being disciplined with the order, it's very hard for most of us. And I think appreciating that and respecting the order and practicing things. And I think all the people who actually created wonderful things, they started from there. They respect the order and they practice it. And then after that, they saw the window to understand that order and that structure, and they start exploring that artistic side. And I think, yeah, I think that's where I think most of the magic happens. When you, like, if you want to dance and someone who doesn't know the rules and he start doing random things, no one want to dance with that person. But if you have someone actually who understands the rules and then he shows his personality during the dance, that's where he become wonderful. So I think that's kind of my take on that.
That's excellent. That's the point about kind of, you have to be an apprentice first. You kind of master the current state of art up to a level, and then you can build on it. You can explore on it, because then you have the skill set to do things.
Exactly.
Excellent. Jyoti.
Yeah, what I had written on in the chat was cognitively, some people have better skills in fluid reasoning. Fluid reasoning is, or thinking is, ability to transfer information from one experience to another very quickly. Other people, some people are static. They will take time to process the information and just keep at that level. They will not know how to adapt it or transfer it to another situation. So I think when you have that kind of skill, you can easily predict the outcomes because you have already done something in one experience and now you are looking at the similarities in the other experience. And you already know what the outcome was from the other experience. So you are quick in noticing that. So that helps a lot.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. And I'm going to actually have a demonstration of my answer to this question using ideas of Carl Jung and the chessboard. Okay, once everybody has had their take on it. So it's going to be Charlie, Ambika, and Mike. Charlie.
Yeah, okay. For me, my resolution of this problem has been influenced a lot by Buddhism, okay, where they talk about the middle way, where the two opposites are nihilism and eternalism, or you know, static structures, you can put it that way. And so it's kind of like you make things up as you go along. There's an expression that is one of my favorites called dancing on the edge of chaos, because it's not either or. It's not either chaos or order. There's all kinds of stuff that are halfway in between. It's like a polar opposites. And so living life is, to me, is pushing yourself as far as you can go to the edge of chaos and then dance. Okay, so it's this idea of having an interaction or a relationship with the unknown, and trying to bring something out. And my favorite expression is John Keats, where he said, "Love is truth, and truth is love is truth is beauty, and beauty is truth, and that's all you need to know." And so to me, there's the tendency for a lot of people in science is to think in terms of domination and not engineering.
Charlie, we are having problem with your audio.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You can just go ahead and turn off your video. That will help.
Okay. Okay. Like
I think if you speak closer to the mic and slowly, it'll be fine.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Anyway, I'll was my whole thing missed?
No, just the last couple of sentences. That's it.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. So yeah, it's
that's fine, Charlie. Charlie.
Anyway, yeah, I think I said enough. That you know,
okay.
I got the,
okay. Let me just build on it. I think the point that you're making about kind of dancing at the edge, I think is very well taken. Actually, Jordan Peterson spends a lot of time on that. I mean, he thinks that you should live with 1 foot in order and 1 foot in chaos. I think of it mostly as rock climbing. You know, you have two legs. Order is actually keeping your, place on the rock. And you always need to have, in order to grow, you need to have the other leg looking for the next spot. And that is chaos. And then what you do is that you transfer the weight to that new leg so that your other leg becomes free to do that. That's the only way you grow. So I like that very much. So kind of to operate on the edge and having these two parts. We have the two parts. We have two faculties. We have the emotional faculty, which is very good, or intuitive faculty, which is very good at dealing with chaos. We've got a analytical reasoning faculty, which is very good at dealing with order. And you kind of have to go between them all the time for it to work really well. So thank you very much, Charlie. Really appreciate that. Next up is Ambika, followed by Mike. Ambika.
Actually, I don't remember what I wanted to respond to at the time, but what I can say is this is really a fascinating discussion. I'm very grateful to be here. I have a terrible time following instructions and reading contracts. I can't follow that language. It's just bizarre to me. And it throws me for a spin. And then it's really helpful when somebody just says, do this, then do this. And then it's so easy. I don't know why I have that block. And Joe is, he deals with contracts, and I'm like, I could never do that, read contracts. And then why do those things have to be 20 pages long? Why so many wheretofores and theretofores? And I never read the union contract all these years because it was so disgusting.
Thanks, Ambika. So Mike, the question is, what is the proper interplay between the artistic and the engineering, between chaos and order? What's your answer? You got 2 minutes.
My answer would be
no, the other mic. Sorry. The magical mic, the magical realist mic.
No, I'm not magical. That is
no, you're not magical enough, and you're not realist enough. He's trying to capture this entire issue in his name itself. Magical realism. Go ahead, Mike.
Okay, well, it is magical realism, which is, and there's a story behind that too, which is probably beyond this, not appropriate here. The dancing at the edge, of chaos and reality is important. Chaos and order. How Fad described how you learn how to dance, or how a musician, a drummer, or a violinist learns how to play. He learns how to play this piece, and it gets wired into his brain, and it's done. And all of these things are done by a mode. They don't solve the complicated differential equations of motion or the combinatorics of a chess program when a person does it. What they do is a successive approximation scheme, like the OODA loop that we talked about, where they break this down into small segments where their causality can be traced. So, and the wiring of the brain facilitates this. So you end up getting a situation where, for example, when you're driving home, you may suddenly realize you're at your exit and you don't realize how you got there. There's a similar situation that goes on when a concert pianist is playing a music piece, when a chess player is trying to win at a chess thing. And so the mind goes through a successive approximation, and then kind of an annealing mechanism where you move the problem to a much simpler problem, and then correct with feedback along the ways. And the wiring of the brain institutionalizes that, so it occurs over and over again. Wonderful. Now, that's to some extent, this is what Roger Penrose described in The Emperor's New Mind.
Thank you, Mike. We need to do an entire meetup on Penrose. You keep talking about Penrose. You brought it up 50 times so far. So let's do a meetup on Penrose.
Well, I probably don't know enough. Maybe you can, with your charm, you can get Penrose to show up.
Sure. We'll go for that. We'll try that. Mike, what I want to do, the other Mike now, not realist, not magical, the chess martial arts Mike. So what I want to do is I want to try to illustrate this point using Jung's functions and the chessboard. So can we share the chessboard?
Sure.
So folks, I'm going to give I also want to combine that with Mike's point about interpersonal relationships. and value of interpersonal relationships. So can we have a chessboard where I have only 4 pawns on each side on like A1, C1?
Just 4 pawns?
Just four pawns on each side. So on A1, C1, E1, and G1. Just those. So folks, what I'm going to do is that I want to talk, yeah, just like that.
A1, but give me the squares again.
A1, C1, not B1, C1, E1, and G1. And similarly on exactly opposite side for the black pawns.
Like that?
All right. Okay. So perfect. All right. So this is Carl Jung on order and chaos. Okay, this is my version of Carl Jung on order and chaos. The left side is order. Okay, the left 2 pawns. The white is you. Okay, the black is somebody else. All right. The functions on the left hand side is anybody who knows Carl Jung's functions. It is thinking and sensing. The first pawn on the left is thinking. The next one is sensing. And then there are 2 kind of pawns on the right hand side. Those are intuition, that's intuition. And the next one is feeling. Okay. Furthermore, I'm going to distinguish between external and internal. So this is a simplified version. Jung has 8 functions, but in order to illustrate this, I'm using only 4 of those functions. So the first pawn on the left, A1, if you could point to that, that is TE. Okay, that is TE. The next pawn is SE. So these are external functions. So TE is about planning things over space and time and getting things done over space and time. This C1 that is Mike is pointing to, that is SE, that is actually moving in the world. Okay. The E1 pawn is NI. So that is intuition. It's your vision of what is possible. It's your brain pulling together everything that you know wordlessly to form a picture, a vision. That's what we call intuition. Okay, so this is NI, or introverted intuition. And the last one, FI, that is your feeling, that is your motivation. Okay, now what happens is that you can evaluate which of, for different people, some people are stronger at some of these functions than others. Okay, so I'm going to assume that you plot your strengths from 4 to 1. So for example, let's say you are a 2 on TE. So if you could move that to 2, that pawn, the first pawn.
This one?
Yeah, to 2. No, sorry, to 2, A2. Yeah, so that is, that is your strength, let's say. Whereas on SE, you are, let's say, 3. So the maximum is 4. So 4 is maximum. So if you could move to CE, a C3. Okay, and let's say your intuition is fantastic. So you can move to E4. Okay, and let's say your feeling that your, kind of emotionality is kind of also high, let's say 3, but not as good as your intuition. Suppose you were like this, okay? Now, people vary. So people's ability to do structuring varies. People's kind of presence in the physical world varies. People's ability to have intuition varies. People's having kind of deep feelings, internal feelings varies, okay? Now, when you're dealing with somebody else, and this is the point that Mike is making, suppose you're very poor in TE. Let's say the person that you're faced with, they will also have different strengths. So let's say that person you're dealing with has very strong TE. So then it will be the black pawn will go there. Yes, exactly. And let's say that they're actually very weak on, let's say in the SE, they're kind of middle like that. And they're very, very weak on 1 on intuition. And their feeling is also very low. So let's say 2 like that. Okay. So, and that other person can be so you'll meet hundreds of people in your life. and they will have a different profile. Okay. So now one of the things is that if you're weak on something, I found one of the best ways to improve is actually to deal with people who are strong on that, because you actually see what the range of things is. So this is a way of kind of mapping yourself and mapping other people and trying to figure out. Many times what happens is that, let's say you are full of intuition and the other person doesn't even understand intuition, then you're going to have a lot of misunderstandings. You're going to be saying something which is intuitive and they're saying, what is the base for this? I don't understand it at all. So you can understand some of the conflicts through this as well. So you can not only improve, but you can understand other people. So this is a tool that you can use for kind of analyzing yourself where you are. And I find it very useful. Now, this is like a quick version of it using chessboard. And this is, I'm also incorporating kind of the interpersonal relationships between people, which is actually quite complex, but it gives you kind of an idea that you can measure how strong you are on different things. It's good to know actually where you're strong, where you're weak. And it's also good to be aware where the other person is strong and where they are weak. And that allows you to see what potential problems you have with dealing with them, as well as potential upsides. So this is my integration of those 2 points. So, and any thoughts, any comments, you're welcome to do that.
Yes, please write a novel with these characters.
Oh, yeah, there are many ways of doing this. So thank you, Ambika.
Short story, or you know, interplay, like drama. Yeah.
Yeah, that we have done before. I used to run these meetups, MBTI meetups, where I would have 80 people show up, who all knew which ones what they were strong on, what they're weak on. We would divide them into groups, just like the breakout groups, 4 different times using 4 different themes of matching up things, and then describe what happened afterwards. So that's that's the best way of doing it, actually.
Shrikant, I had a quick question. What happens if you have 2 that are essentially the exact same scale?
Oh yeah, I mean that happens all the time. Then you have multiple strengths, and I mean, and that's quite common. And that's
like
not
a mirror. Like it would be like a mirror. Like if you were different name, but the if you gave the rating, they would both be a 1, and like say the TE, they might be a 3.
Yeah. The scale is just a scale. So it's not the ranking, it's the scale. So how strong it is. It's quite common to have 2 of these things very high, 4, or you can have 2 of them very low.
Like a carbon copy, yes.
Right, but I mean, it's not carbon copy in the sense that because each of these functions has their own character. And so the strength in, like, for example, thinking looks very different from strength in intuition. So, but yeah, of course, you can definitely, you can have kind of multiple strengths. All right.
Can I ask a quick question? Is there a good introductory book on this subject that starts off introductory but goes pretty deep by the end?
Okay, so the book that I would recommend is, I mean, if you want really deep, okay, if you want something really deep, the deepest work on this is by John Beebe, who actually combines Jung's ideas of archetypes with Jung's psychological functions. Unfortunately, he's very difficult to read. Okay, so there is a book. So what I would do is that I actually have a video, which is the best video. That's actually the most popular video of the meetup that we have done, by Richard Owen. So Joe, could you do me a favor? Can you find the video on 52 Living Ideas and put a link? That's the most popular video on our YouTube channel. And that's the best introduction to the entire complexity of Richard does a fantastic job of presenting each of these functions, presenting how they interact with one another, and how personalities formed through interplay between these. So that's a very good place to start. And my favorite book on this is called Depth Typology by, I forget his name, but if you search for Depth Typology, that he has actually, what he does is that he traces these functions through the work of Carl Jung, and then Myers-Briggs, Isabel Myers, and then John Beebe, and tries to show how these ideas developed over time. So that's where I would start. Okay, thank you. So Mike, I'm now going to turn it to you for any kind of comments, anything you want to ask.
Yeah, I just put in the chat a book called The Talent Code by someone named Daniel Coyle. I'm pretty sure the spelling is correct.
Mm-hmm.
And in case you want to explore the breakdown of, or essentially what Coyle did is he went around the world and he spotted pockets of excellence where people seem to be performing very well. And he wanted to find out why. And for example, in the book, he talked about how Brazilians became super good at soccer. And then he talked in certain neighborhoods, they were playing something called futsal, which is a mini version of soccer. You can play it on concrete. You can play it 6 against 6. And what happens is you end up touching the ball a hell of a lot more than if you were on a big field. So it's very similar to what I did with baseball, just kind of creating a game within a game. He does that over multiple disciplines in the book. I found it very, very interesting. No, I don't really have much to add. I can't thank you all enough for taking a chance, honestly, to put yourself out there and trying to make connections where sometimes they don't exist. And I was really intrigued to see people with very technical backgrounds also find out that they perform in musicals or ride horses and dance and things like that.
Wonderful. I think Madeline had something, and then we'll wrap up. Madeline, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Shrikant, that was extremely interesting. The way you mapped the functions onto the pawns on the chessboard.
Mm-hmm.
Terrific way of visualizing the different strengths, and also in dealing with other people and their strengths. And I'm just wondering, I'm looking at my little notes that I made,
Mm-hmm.
going across. So in between, so it would be something like TE, TI, SE, SI, NI, NE, FI, FE.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, that was really, really, really terrific. Thank you.
Well, thank you. It's coming from you. It's something I know you're extremely familiar with this, but the thing is that Madeline, as you know, I have like 350 diagrams on these functions of various ways of interconnecting them, and this is I just came up with this one right now, because Mike put such an interesting challenge. I said, what can you use this chessboard for? And it is like you're kind of like playing chess with the other person. You're kind of your functions are interacting with one another, because like you're talking to them, let's say about planning things, then you're doing kind of with TE. You are at odds when they are actually talking using one of those functions, and you are actually trying to listen to it with another function, and you can't really get, both parties don't get each other. But if you have kind of just the basic literacy on each of these functions of what is going on, at least you begin to understand what's going on. So at least the anger disappears. It will still be difficult, but anger disappears, and you can actually try to work together. But yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Appreciate that, Madeline. So Mike, I think this worked out really, really well. And I really like your style of presenting because you kind of so clearly established, your points, your own experience. So people could say, okay, that's what it is. And I love the example of chess. And chess is such a complex thing that you can do a lot with it. And I'm sure given a chance, you will do a lot with it. So I think it is, it's just wonderful. And I really look forward to having you back. It would be just wonderful to have you do more of these. If you want to do these in just the Comprehensivist series, probably, before you can kind of commit to a more regular schedule on the other, things that we've talked about, maybe we can do more of these comprehensivist, in the Comprehensivist series. What do you think?
Yeah, I would love it. And also, again, it just hits home for me how I keep getting pushed in different directions because of these meetups. I just happened to present tonight, but even when I'm sitting here as a student, I'm just amazed at how I find myself pushed into all these different disciplines because of the format that you set up. So I'm all in. Yeah, I'm.
Sure. Do you have to run, or do you have a few minutes?
I have a few minutes.
Okay. So I want to talk to you about the interpersonal part.
Sure.
Because that's the biggest thing that I got from you, because like I grew up being fairly introverted. I didn't talk much with people. I talk more now, I think, but it used to be I didn't talk much. So I think people underestimate how much they can learn from other people, but it requires, I think, some things. It requires certain kind of quality in yourself to be able to make the most of it. Firstly, you have to be, I'm going to blurt it out. You probably can add to this, so the question is, what characteristics do you need to have in order to make the most of this great opportunity of interpersonal interaction? Okay, because that's the question. Because if you look at it, to me, it's by far the most easiest way of getting the maximum growth in you, because we actually relate to other human beings far more deeply than a book or anything that we may be trying to do. So if you can set up kind of a good interaction with people, that can be just amazing. And there are people who have done amazing things all around us. I live in New York, you live in New York, right? I mean, there are just incredible people around us. Okay, but people don't interact enough, I think. I think it's a waste. Okay, I keep feeling it's a waste. I certainly know that from these meetups. Like, we did a meetup on Aborigines. Margarita was doing a meetup. Somebody showed up from Australia.
Wow.
Who interacted with Aborigines all the time. Okay, we did this meetup on Dante. This Italian lady showed up whom I said, can you please read Italian? I said, I don't need to read, I can recite Dante.
Wow.
But what that does is so that upside of what other people have to offer you is so large. So I will put this question for anybody. I'll start with you, and you can take as much time as you want. And then if anybody wants to add, so I'll ask it as a question. Firstly, I'm saying it's a huge opportunity, and I think all of us are agreed on that. So of what you can learn from this, what kind of attitude do you need to have in order to make the most of this opportunity?
I think you need to disarm yourself sometimes to get close to people, and you need to approach people without an agenda. And I'm not saying sometimes an agenda is a good thing if you have something good that you want to work on, but we're not here as business associates. We're not here trying to accomplish anything but share knowledge and kind of get each other to think. So I personally immediately turn off when I sense an agenda other than somebody trying to help me. So in terms of an interpersonal skill, I tend to shy away and clam up and close down if I think the person that I'm interacting with has an agenda other than what they're supposed to be doing. 52 Living Ideas, for me, has done the complete opposite. I lost any apprehension when you personally put your hands up at a meeting and said, I do not know this book, talking about the Tao Te Ching. So for you to do that, you're being vulnerable and you're being honest. So I think the first thing, I don't know if disarming is the right word, but I think just clear yourself to the point where be honest in what it is you want from the other person. That's number one. The other thing is you have to do it a lot. So again, the reason I had to drive a taxi and work in a deli at such a young age came from trauma. But the fact is that I did it for many years gave me an opportunity. I mean, how many interactions? It's innumerable. I can't count. But you have to do it a lot, even if you're uncomfortable, to just have conversations with people. And the richest ones I find are some of the ones you least expect. As a matter of fact, you even said it yourself. You've met people on the subway or on the street that you just, you know, but that happens by putting yourself out there and starting the conversation in a disarmed way. That's probably all I could add to it. And it's essentially all that or the only way I learn. And back to Ambika's point, I also can't read a legal contract. As fascinating as I find computer science in terms of what I believe it can do, and AI, I could never read or study computer science because I didn't feel emotion from it. Interesting stuff. It's fascinating.
Wonderful. Next up is Joe, Madeline, and Vanessa. Joe, what do you think?
I mean, I really think this is really interesting, and how we get the most out of like
Joe, you are very
interpersonal
good at this, by the way.
Thank you. You know why? It's because I'm from New Jersey. But that's an insight. We're very good at interpersonal skills in this side of the state. Sorry, but I think the most important thing is that you and Michael alluded to it, is that there's a certain level of sincerity with no agenda, but you always have a certain value system for listening, and so you're actually listening intently to obtain some, let's just say, wisdom of some sort, but you're only listening for that. And I think that that's the best way to get better at interpersonal connections. The other is, Michael also mentioned it, is that it's getting outside your comfort zone. And another great example that we had, and I'm so happy that Michael shared his story today, because actually it reminded me of my grandfather, who he lost his father at 10 years old and had to take over the house. And this is 100 years ago, but it helped him immensely in a lot of different ways to see things. But the example that Michael gave with working at a deli or working in a taxi cab and getting those interpersonal connections. Another example was Roger, who also presents here so beautifully on Thursday nights. And he said, I became a bartender because I couldn't talk to anybody. Mm-hmm. And he said, when you're a bartender, you have to talk to people. So getting outside of your comfort zone is another way of really developing your interpersonal skills, because you can develop empathy in that process, because you realize how hard it is to get outside of yourself. And so once you become more empathetic, you also become a better listener. And so that I think it's a process of really just being open and really challenging yourself in a number of different ways. And I think that's how you can obtain so much information from so many people, and then you genuinely listen to them. I mean, I think that's a principle that you have to have as well. Mm-hmm. Anyway, that's
excellent. Thank you, Joe. It was wonderful. Madeline.
Yeah, I'm with Michael on this one. This is one of the best things going. 52 Living Ideas. And has been certainly the bright spot in the pandemic for many of us. I think that part of it is that since it is idea oriented, it's very suitable for Meetup and for the online format. Works pretty well, and I think that also it attracts a large number. I'd say probably pretty much everyone in 52 Living Ideas would be what Jung would call an intuitive type, who are really burning to discuss abstractions and mental representations of the world, and how different types of mental representational systems map onto each other. And that is a very difficult thing to stumble across in real life unless you are taking a class or working in a specific kind of company. And so I find that, often sometimes the most I'll talk in an entire week will be at one of these meetup groups, because it's the only interesting conversation I'm probably going to have. I have discovered, speaking as an INTP who had to apply myself to getting social skills early in life, was that people, first of all, are just looking to see, is this person sane, or are they going to turn to me and say, I bit off my big toe, want to see? So there's going to be some basic level of mammalian interaction of just sort of ascertaining that this person can hold, a fundamental conversation. And then after that, it can get dull so quickly that I will often just sort of throw things in, like to a conversation about the weather. I'll just say to someone, yeah, it's raining, but sometimes I think, okay, we're standing underneath a big cloud system as if we were looking at the earth from the outside and there were all these clouds swirling overhead. That's all that's going on above us. It's not personal. And I just see how they respond if they're interested in picking up on things. But here in these groups, people are always interested in these things. It's fantastic.
Thank you, Madeline. And it's wonderful that you talk here. I think you add a lot. I think that's what it is. It's like, I mean, the way I think about it is like, this is a third place. My meetups have always been like the third place. Like, Starbucks is the idea of not workplace, not family, but a third place. So it's a place where people share values of exploring things about the world, about themselves, about ideas. And that's the values that bring it together. There is no, so it is a very different kind of a place because it is based on these values. And people who really like it are people who value those things. And for them, it is like, it's fantastic. It's just like for me. And I am tremendously grateful because all the people who show up, each of them adds things to it. I have just enough structure to make sure that everybody gets, full 2 minutes living through every 2 minutes that they spend. Not 1 minute. 1 minute, I give a little bit of leeway for people to speak, but 2 minutes, I want to make sure. So it's very highly concentrated too. And that's a very difficult dance to kind of pull off. So that's the hardest thing. But the payoff is just incredible. And thank you, Madeline, really appreciate that. Vanessa, how do you make the most of the opportunity for that you have through interpersonal learning?
Well, sometimes I don't explain directly, but I think I'm going to compare it to music, especially classical music, like maybe Beethoven, Bach. Can you imagine listening to a symphony? Usually they're movements. If you didn't have the flutes and the piccolos where it's nice and soft, or when they come in full throttle without the timpani. And sometimes you want that solo instrument. Can you imagine play the bumblebee if you've got trumpets there? Play the bumblebee, I think that's basically all strings. So sometimes maybe you just want one for that piece of music. But you do have the variety and you can appreciate it. And there's different forms, maybe people like the rock and roll, but usually each instrument, plays its own part. It may be minuscule. You think, oh my gosh, we don't need piccolos, or we don't need the sax, or we don't need the cello in there or the bass, but when you're listening to it, it's like, why, something's missing. I mean, I had this since I was a kid, date myself. I got to see Ormandy conduct. I felt so bad. I thought I was going to have a heart attack at the end of Muti at pre-Kimmel Center. So I remember, that's kind of ingrained in me. You experience it as a young kid. So you can relate and think, my gosh, or, if you take the piano out. So it's like, if you hear it, even if you know a little about it, you feel, wait, something's not quite right. They need something else in here. I'm sure, Beethoven didn't just spend the weekend, he probably spent maybe months on a particular symphony or the movement. And am I going to have them coming soft? Or am I going to pick up the pace? So
wonderful. Thank you, Vanessa. Next up is Jean. Jean, you are on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, Yeah, this is actually the best thing happened during COVID, I think. I always, I used to ask people, if you can choose any time in the past and the future, which area you want to live, you know, and I always say I like to live in Paris, Renaissance Day. They have saloon, they have different writers, philosophers, every get together, you know, talking about different things. And I also think as architect, you know, the Starbucks have this great idea about having this communal place. Unfortunately, nobody talks to each other. Everybody look at their computer. So, and in Paris, they used to have this place, all the writers, and that will generate ideas. You know, modern architecture movement starts with these clubs. I think it's very fortunate we have you start this group, and we gather all these people who are interested in this subject, because most people around me are not interested, unfortunately. So it's such a rare treasure I think we have here. And when I travel, you know, I was like, the one thing I miss is I need to get back to the meeting. I really enjoy my travel, but that's something I really miss. So I really appreciate your organization.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Jean. And what happens is that, you know, people like Joe, you, Madeline, because you keep coming back, there is a conversation, a very deep conversation that develops between in the group. And because what that does is it keeps on adding this kind of building up the common knowledge. Whether when we read, you know, Tao Te Ching together, when we read Jordan Peterson together, look at Jung together, all of that terminology, all of those concepts actually can be used to discuss the next thing we are discussing. And that produces something which is very deep and very rare. I mean, people do get this through with few friends. You know, few really good friends will do that, but this is like expanding that in a very deep way. So, and you can have a conversation with people whom you have just met at that level. And I think that's what is there. And kind of answering that question for me, I think partly you need humility. You need to kind of say, look, this is what I am. This is what I can do. And you also need gratefulness. You know, you need to say, look, world has produced some amazing things. There are some great people out there. And let me learn from them. So you kind of have to, at the same time, you have to be kind of saying, look, these are my strengths. So let me use the strengths. This is what I can do. Let me do that. So you have to be kind of realistic, both about your strengths and your weaknesses, and kind of appreciate, you know, appreciate what people have to offer. Madeline.
Yes, I think also what going with what Gung and you were just saying, what is very unusual about it is that it combines the intellectual with the feeling aspects, and that's what gives it so much depth. Even for those of us whose strongest feelings can be about ideas, there's still feelings. And so that has been another really good thing. Also, Shrikant, I thought it was brilliant of you this winter, when all of us were going crazy and rambling on at great length, to have everyone start writing things down and coming up with condensed questions. It was a terrific solution. And it curbed my personal tendency, which is to think aloud for 3 minutes and then arrive at a conclusion. So I thought that was a really great tactic to take.
Yes, and you are INTP, so this is I expect that of you. So I really appreciate it when you curb it, because what happens is that from INTP perspective, it's the most natural thing, but for a whole bunch of other people, it's just too much to take in. But at the same time, you're talking about something really deep, and you're making a really fundamental point, and the externalization of kind of writing really helps in a big way. All right, folks. So Mike, thank you so much. I mean, this was just a great, fantastic discussion.
Had a blast. Thank you.
And I think you know what you want to do. I think it fits really beautifully on the Wednesdays. So either we can do this on Comprehensivist Wednesdays, or if you want to do just before the Comprehensivist Wednesdays. So I think Wednesdays would be a perfect time for what you're doing. Ambika, you had Ambika and Karina. Ambika, you're on mute.
I just want to say this is such an amazing process. I think schools and colleges need it so desperately because they're dead and heavy.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, they are dead, and that's what we have to do. We have to basically supplant them. You have to supplant them, because I seriously think that, like, for example, I want to learn about semiotics. I have Brian Kemple coming this Sunday. He's the student of John Deely, who is the most prominent person to contribute. He's written the maximum number of books. He's moved the thing forward. This guy is the only person who got PhD under him, knows the thing really, really deeply. And he's just coming and talking to us about that. And he's very excited about doing that.
What comes up is play and polymathy in education.
Right. So one is that. The second thing is that there is a lot of things wrong with the education. I mean, the entire idea of people sitting down saying, okay, this is the course, this is the professor, so I have to listen to the professor, this is the book that I have to read on this. All of those things are wrong. It's basically word that you're trying to understand. And so again, this is a peer group. People are of every age, of every level of knowledge, every point of view, and all of that you are encountering in the process of learning. That's the right human environment for learning. So yeah, absolutely.
You're going to start learning communities in schools and let them just mushroom out. So that's what the kids can, students can do. I tried, it didn't work, but we need more voices.
No, it has to be done. I mean, the thing is that you need innovation at the level of structure for those things to happen. Next up is Karina. Karina, go ahead.
Hi. Yeah, I just wanted to express my gratitude for this space and just this is, I guess I always knew this was like a cool meetup, but yeah, I appreciate everyone's sort of articulation of like how profound it is that to have a space like this that offers people the opportunity to develop intellectually and for me, when that can be sort of difficult and sort of juggling it with my own feelings and how to put things into words and whether or not I can sort of offer something of value to the group, etc. Just the experience of being like in relationship with all of that and like being welcome here is like really special. So I just really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Karina. I mean, the thing is that the focus here is about learning. All of us are explorers. All of us are trying to learn. And it really doesn't matter what level we are on any particular thing. I may know some things, you may know some things much better. And I think if we are open to just learning, I think all of us benefit from it. So I think that's the ethos of the group. And I think that's very powerful. That's very powerful. All right, folks. So thank you very much. Always grateful. See you soon. Bye.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Good night. Good night.